So first off, I'm Angie. I work at the Xerces Society, so it's a nonprofit who studies and loves invertebrates, which we discussed is an organism without a backbone. And it's named very unusually for, it's called the Xerces blue butterfly. And it was a very lovely blue butterfly that used to fly in the sand dunes of San Francisco. And then it just disappeared in 1943. So the society was formed because they were sad that this beautiful thing disappeared. But yeah, so my organization, we do pollinator conservation, we do agricultural biodiversity, we do studying of species, so like bumblebees, we help with that bumblebee survey, there's a firefly study, and then also helping farmers figure out ways to use less pesticides or trying to study that. Yeah, and then I don't work alone. There's hundreds of, thousands of individuals that are Xerces Society members, or we get grant funding from the government. We do stuff with private institutions. So I work a lot with General Mills because they want to see more pollinator habitat in their supply chain. So like apples and blueberries and Cheerios, they're big on bees. And then we also, love when people grow flowers in their gardens, and so everyone contributes to helping invertebrates. And it even includes, we expanded to freshwater mussels, so like things you wouldn't think about, but they're also invertebrates. So, and then, so why do you guys? Well, first of all, tell me about you. Why are you here today? Why do you want to learn more about pollinators? Do you have a garden, or I don't know? Do you have land that you want to put more flowers on? Or,
It is gardening, yeah.
Oh,
Trying
yeah.
to make sure that the garden is as healthy and
Yeah.
as possible.
Sounds good. Yeah.
I'm cutting down on my garden, but we still live on land,
Oh,
land
yeah.
forest, and it's just interesting to know more about where you live, the environment that you live in.
That's true.
And I have friends who raise bees, and
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yay. Well, and flowers are good for everyone. Well, yeah, so that's good. Well, so for pollinators, 85% of flowering plants need someone to move pollen from point A to point B. And there are things that are wind pollinators like corn and grass. But most things that make something delicious that you want to eat need someone to move that pollen. And the pollinators can be bees and bats and even lizards. But majority are insects. So those are very important for making seeds of all kinds. And like I said, they mentioned food. They help make food for us. So tomatoes and strawberries and apples, those are all pollinator dependent. And so we need vitamins, so we need pollinators to make those vitamins for us. And also, all that food production is a $27 billion industry for the US. So it's economically important to have pollinators, and they work for free. So that's just profit and not, yeah. And also pollinators. What would our lives be if we didn't have the spring blossoms? Coming of spring, you think of flowers, or even mosquitoes. What would a barbecue be without some mosquito bites? Like, would that even be summer? I mean, it might be a little more pleasant summer. And then for Halloween, what's something we all like to carve? Pumpkins. There are specific squash bees that pollinate just pumpkins and squashes. That's all they do. So if you have a squash plant and you see a bee in there, that is a specialist bee. So, and last, we make those pumpkins into pumpkin pie. So all the way through to Thanksgiving. So it's like a year of pollinator love. Except for those mosquitoes. We don't talk about those. And then last, so if you think of a nice juicy caterpillar, you might not want to eat it, but everything else wants to eat that caterpillar. So pollinators are a huge wildlife food source. They are eaten when they're caterpillars, they're eaten. So anyway, so everything's eating caterpillars, right? Things eat butterflies and moths, like bats swooping through the night. Moths are trying to dodge the bats, but they get eaten anyway. Come up?
Well,
Not yet.
it's super soft.
Sorry. Okay, and then, for example, do you guys know the chickadee, the little cute black and white bird? It goes chickadee. They eat 400 caterpillars, well, they're young, eat 400 caterpillars a day. And the young are 16 days in the nest. So that's over, how many caterpillars? 6,400 caterpillars.
Oh my gosh.
Just for one chickadee's nest. Think of all the chickadees that are out there. There we go.
So before you show all the slides, I might want to suggest if you're sitting towards the back, because we were going to use the bigger one, you might want to move forward before she really gets into it.
Hey, there's my
so
fat
that you can read and see everything. It's up to you, but it's a smaller screen than what we were going to go with. So.
Okay. Grizzly bears eat moth larvae. So you know the army cutworm that turns into the miller moth? The grizzly bear in the summer finds and eats those grubs because they're so fatty. And I have eaten a caterpillar larvae, and it's like eating a potato chip. It's very rich and fatty. Once you get past chewing it for like 5 minutes, the skin is really tough. Anyway, so they help the ecosystem, so they're really important. However, despite being really important, they are declining, which is why we're wanting to see more habitat and encouraging them grow. So bumblebees are beautiful, charismatic bumblebees are declining. Butterflies are declining. And it includes things that are specialists and generalists. So like the monarch only eats one type of plant, that's a specialist. A generalist would be like a skipper butterfly that just eats native grass. It doesn't care what species, just has to be grass. So everyone's having a downslide. That could be many things like habitats disappearing or climate change or disease, a lot of factors, but and then it's across the world. There's, in general, insects are declining. So we're just trying to help everyone come together and do some more for them because they're important and we like them and they do good things for us. So here are our main group of pollinators. We got butterflies, moths, bees, flies, wasps, beetles. Okay, so first off, butterflies and moths pollinate day and night. Butterflies during the day, moths at night. Caterpillars are food for everyone. Even you. Don't knock it till you try it. Flies. Now we saw some on our walk. We had a syrphid fly that looks like a bee, but it's actually a fly. And here's a fly compared to a bumblebee. He has big eyes. It's got same stripes, but its legs are really skinny. Now this is a male bumblebee, that doesn't help. And it's got teeny tiny antenna on front where the bumblebee has really long antennae. So that's how you can tell the difference. But flies are great because, so this is the syrphid fly's larvae and it eats aphids. So if you got aphids in your garden and you see these wriggly green things, that's a fly larvae. And then it grows up to be a pollinator. So doubly great. Beetles are the most ancient pollinators. So they're associated with magnolia flowers. That big bowl of a flower helps that chunky beetle get in there and pollinate because it's not very delicate. And then the magnolia blossom is kind of really open so the beetle can get in there versus like a delicate blue flax. You know, there is a beetle on this, but anyway, so beetles help. And they also have larvae, there's the ladybug larvae, that eat aphids as well. So beetles are great for pollinators and eating pests. And then wasps. So we have, this wasp was this big, you can't tell in the photo, but it's pollinating, but this is probably one of the tarantula hawks, so it stings a spider and buries it with an egg, and then that egg eats the spider. I'm sorry, yeah, while the spider's still alive.
Oh my.
But it's a pollinator, and because it's eating like caterpillars, it's great for your garden. So here's a parasitoid wasp. This wasp is teeny tiny, and it's laid some eggs on this caterpillar, and the caterpillar was doing its, thing. Meanwhile, getting eaten from the inside out. And when those wasps are ready to come out, they weave a cocoon that sticks out of the caterpillar. So if you see a caterpillar with lots of little white things on it, it's the wasps coming out. And when the wasps emerge, the caterpillar dies. But great for pest control. And we saw some of those on our walk today. And anyone was there could attest they were like teeny tiny. You would not think that was a wasp. But they could parasitize individual aphids. So think how small an aphid is, and then the wasp is even smaller. And then bees are the most important pollinator. We call them VIPs, very important pollinators. There's 3 characteristics that make for that. First of all, they collect and transport pollen, and they have very specific body parts that allow them to do it. They're very hairy, so the pollen can get all up in their hair, and then they clean their hair and they pack it onto their specially created legs that have very long hairs, or there's kind of a scoop there that they can pack the pollen onto. And then they forage around their nests, so all the flowers around them, up to like a mile or so, can get pollinated. And then they exhibit flower consistency. So that means when a bee finds a new flower, it's like it's going on a date with that flower, and if that flower is really tasty, it'll be like, oh yeah, this is the flower for me. So it'll remember and be more efficient at getting pollen off of that flower and only go to that flower. So that's good for the flower because it gets less pollen from other plants that aren't going to make seeds for it. And the bee gets more of the pollen that it likes. So that's why honeybees are used in like an apple orchard, right? They just stick to the apples and they pollinate the apples, and they're not distracted by other flowers because it likes the apple flower. So speaking of honeybees, we're all familiar with honeybees. They're hugely important for agriculture. They're hugely important for honey. We all like to eat honey. But they are technically from Europe. So my presentation is more about native bees, but I just wanted to acknowledge they're also very important bees. But I'm going to talk about other very important bees as well, so you know all the types of bees. Okay. So in North America, Canada, Mexico, we have 5,000 species of native bees. Crazy. USA, 3,600 species of native bees. Washington, 600 species. And then in your yard, you could have 30 to 40 different kinds of bees. So there are so many kinds of native bees. 90% of those bees are solitary, meaning they themselves, just one female, she's doing her hard work, laying eggs, collecting pollen, and then she dies. So here's the life cycle of one of those solitary bees. This is a mining bee. So she emerges in the spring out of the ground. She digs a hole, she collects pollen, she makes a little ball, and then she lays one egg on it, caps the cell, puts another pollen ball. And then, so there's a series of capsules, and over the whole summer, this little tiny bee larvae grows and grows and grows, and then it eventually pupates or goes into a shell, and it starts to become an adult. And then, over the winter, it stays in that pupal form, and when it's warm enough, it'll emerge, dig out of the soil, and start the cycle over. Yeah.
Did you say 90% are solitary bees?
90%. So out of what? Like, what's 90% of 600 out of Washington? Those are all solitary. So everyone's doing this. They could be doing this. So the functional groups. So we got diggers, the ground nesting bees. Most are ground nesting. 30% are tunnel nesting. So if there's an old dead log, there's a tunnel nester in there. If you've got a pithy stemmed plant like an elderberry, you can make a nest in the elderberry's hollow stem. Or blackberries. Oh, there you go, the bee house. So This is for stem nesters, so 30% of the bees will find this very appealing.
Can you buy that?
Yeah, you can buy it, you can make these, you can, so then in here she's got plugged capsules. So if you see mud or leaves over the covering of the hole, there are eggs and pollen balls in there. So somebody was very busy and made a nest. And it's good to have many different sizes because all those bees are different sizes and they're very picky about their hole. So if the hole's too big and they're small, they're gonna avoid it.
But
So
they don't, like, be predators on smaller ones or
no,
whatever.
they just look for the right size hole for them.
They can live that close together, all the different kinds of bees?
Yeah.
I mean, I know
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
kind of where
oh,
you're
yeah.
asking,
Yeah.
but.
And then you'll wait, so these will be plugged up and they'll emerge in the next year. So,
Just get one.
and then the smallest percentage of native bees are social, so bumblebees. And there are some ground nesting bees that are communal, but they'll still just nest individually. So I went through some of the bee families. Do you guys want to hear more about like the bee families, or like, I can whip through them quickly. They'll probably all look the same to you because like it took me a while. These are things you just absorb immediately. So first of all, we got the bumblebees, social, very hairy, slow and adorable. They're also, because of their size and fur, they're able to fly at lower temperatures. So you might see them out first in the morning. And they like to live in old rodent holes or under rock piles. And if you're seeing a bee that's like here on the ground, or just watch her and see if she goes into a hole, and you might have a colony. So pretty interesting. Next are mining bees. So that was a ground nesting bee that we followed the life cycle on. They live in like bare soil or patchy grass. If you have lawn, you might have some of these living in your lawn. Sometimes they make these weird conical structures that come out of the soil. And if you look and you see a tiny bee right there, because they're afraid to come out because you're standing there. And then we have mason bees. So these are the ones that are more likely to make a nest in one of your bee boxes. We actually saw one who had made a nest in a log out at the nature area. And sometimes they kind of look like blue bottle flies. They're kind of shiny and iridescent black, but they're a bee. Yeah. Okay, we have striped sweat bees. These are the hair, you can see here, the really hairy upper legs. We say that they have chaps. They like to pack the pollen on their chaps. What else? We got small sweat bees, so more chaps, but just smaller. Metallic green sweat bees, you'll definitely notice if you see this because it's very bright and shiny. And then the females are all green and the males have stripes. So if you see that difference, it's the same bee, it's just male and female. And these are ground nesters and they like to have communal colonies. And then leaf cutter bees, they're jelly bellies because they have these really fun hairs on their bellies. And they kind of hold their belly up. So if you see a bee that's doing this, it's probably a leaf cutter bee. And they make these really neat circular cuts on your leaves. So if you see a rose bush that looks a bit mangled, it's probably a leaf cutter bee. There are certain species of plants that they prefer to cut holes out of because I guess they're just easier to chew. I don't know. But if you see this, you've got leaf cutter bees. Longhorn bees, the males have really long antennae, and if they're caught overnight, you might see them together on a sunflower, and they'll be head to head. They're very cute. And then small carpenter bees, these are really small. So we saw some of these on dandelions, and we were like, that's a bee? It's a bee. It's very, very small. And you can kind of see the scale here. Here's the dandelion and these anthers. Like, think how small those are. And these are cavity nesting. So really small holes on here would be filled by this bee. And last we have cuckoo bees. So you guys know, who knows what a cuckoo bird is? Or what's a cuckoo? Yeah.
If it's a cuckoo bird, then they lay eggs in other birds' nests.
Yeah, that's right. So it says, oh, you're doing great work here. That's a great pollen ball. I think I'll lay an egg on that. So it eats the other bee's egg and puts its own egg on the pollen ball. It waits till mom goes away, and she goes into the nest and lays her own egg, and then that egg develops normally and it hatches out. So usually you see the cuckoos here have kind of thin legs because they don't need to gather pollen because they're not doing the hard work. They're just finding nests to lay eggs in. And there are many different types and colors, but their behavior is what makes them a cuckoo. And sometimes they even have this like kind of needle-like pointed butt. So that's a cuckoo. Okay, so what do pollinators need? So all these different types of bees out here. Really easy, what we need to, food and shelter. And then pesticide protection if you can. So food, first, I mean the most important category in my mind, food, right? Get some flowering plants that are appropriate for your area. It sounds like, I mean, we went out there and there are so many flowering plants, I feel like you can't go wrong. Just make sure that you have bloom over 3 seasons, so spring, summer, fall. It doesn't have to be the same plant blooming that whole time, but you know, some like a willow blooms in the spring and then it transitions to a daisy and then it goes to goldenrod or what have you. Multiple different species, so, because think about it, like if you were eating and then, well, you gotta wait 2 weeks until the buffet's open again, you're probably gonna get pretty hungry during those 2 weeks, so just keep that bloom consistent. Think about what your precipitation's like, or if you've got sand and you can kind of select plants that will grow better in those conditions. And then, you know, don't plant a variety. If something doesn't grow, don't worry about it, just plant something else. Trial and error. When we put out seed mixes for my job, sometimes we'll have like a mix of 15 or 20 things and only 5 will survive. You're like, all right, this is what grows here. That's fine, but you gotta try many things. So here's an example of the Master Gardener list out of Spokane. They have lots of recommendations on native plants or shrubs that are under 6 feet, over 6 feet. So I brought a copy of the list and it's on the table somewhere. And then Xerces also has plant lists. I have one on the back table there. And it tells you the plants, what type of, if it becomes a tree or a bush. And then on the right side, it tells you if it feeds caterpillars, if it's good for bees, does it have a specialist bee? So you can kind of select, like, oh, I want to just have a lot of caterpillars, I should plant this. And then last, if you are on a walk and you see a plant that's really lovely and you want to know what it is, or maybe if you can buy it somewhere, I look it up at the Burke Herbarium. It's out of Seattle, but they survey the whole state. So I found this lovely shrubby penstemon. I said, does it grow? Will it grow in my area? And there's a map where you can see if there's a little green dot where you're at, then it probably grows there. So you should try and plant it. And you know, it gives you other information about when it blooms, etc. But it's just the Burke Herbarium image collection. So that's real handy. And then, like if you go to a greenhouse and you see something, you're like, will this grow in my yard? You can also come back to here and look it up. And if you see a green dot where you live, you're like, okay, it's probably a good chance that it'll grow in my yard. But if it's not and it's only like over here, you should maybe avoid it because you might waste your money. And then here's some food examples that could grow in this area because I found their dots. So like bellflower, yarrow, blanket flower, fireweed, leafy aster. And all these flowers kind of have different shapes. So like the bellflower, that'd be real good for a bumblebee because it's like a nice tube for it. Versus like this blanket flower is kind of flat, so you're gonna attract different kinds of bees. So just have a variety of shapes because it'll look at different types. And then butterflies, a few more butterflies. We'll go over briefly the life cycle. So you have an egg on a plant, it hatches, becomes a larva. Then the larva grows and grows and grows, the hungry caterpillar. And then it pupates or becomes a chrysalis, and then an adult comes out, right? So what's the most important thing for this is having the right plant, because the mom's not going to lay an egg on anything. If she's a monarch, she likes milkweed. So if you want monarchs, you got to plant milkweed. Versus, here's that. So that's a specialist. If you're wanting a swallowtail, those lots of those by the river today. Swallowtails are a little more generalist. They'll eat from many different families of plants. So if you've got a willow, you've got a chokecherry, you have a cottonwood, then you can get swallowtails. So there's more things for you to plant, and you don't have to worry like, am I gonna get this butterfly? Yeah, you'll get that butterfly with this 5 different species. And then, so we all love the beautiful double petal flowers, the roses that smell amazing. However, those have been bred for us, and sometimes they lose their ability to make pollen and nectar. So I'd say, if you love your beautiful rose, plant some of the roses that have really obvious pollen and nectar. So you're getting some for the bees and you're getting some for yourself, or you just can't let go of those beautiful, huge marigolds, because they're gorgeous, right? Just plant another plant that's got some pollen and nectar available at the same time, and you'll scratch your itch and the bees' itch in your garden. And then if you've got a huge lawn, consider maybe putting some shrubs on the outside, or you could seed some clover in there, something that blooms. Because when a bee flies over a lawn, unless it's one of those ground nesters, it'll probably be like, well, there's nothing here for me. So just another way to like sneak some habitat in there. You don't have to take your lawn out, or if you're playing soccer in it and you're using it for barbecues, like that's fine. Just sneak some plants in there that bloom. I'm just saying. So there's 40 million acres of lawn in the U.S. So if you imagine 40 million acres of flowers, that's a big bee bump, right? And then we get to shelter, so nest sites. We kind of talked about dead sticks, bare ground. If you got some dead standing trees with beetle holes, that's a bee hotel. And even like leaving some bare ground. So these butterflies here are doing puddling. It's where there's minerals that come up in a wet soil, and they're looking for minerals, so they'll be there sticking their tongues out. And we saw some butterflies on poop earlier. Butterflies love poop. There's minerals in that. So things you wouldn't think an insect would want, very appealing. And then if you have like more of a rural where there's not much happening, but it's just wild stuff growing, that's good too. I mean, so you can have habitat in wetlands, old fields, hedgerow margins, windbreaks. If you have cover crop, if you got farm, understories, if you have a solar panel, they could be living under there. So really, neglect is more helpful because that just means they're going in there and making their home out of it. So if you're like, I'm not doing enough, and you've got some vacant areas, you're probably doing a lot. You just don't know it. And then if you've got like a tiny yard and you've got a tree that drops leaves, leave a layer of leaves in your garden beds, and those nice leaves are like a parka for bugs in the winter. And those multiple layers, they'll burrow down in there, like it'll be moths or pupae or you name it, and they'll wait beetles for the spring, and they'll come out of there. They'll take off their leaf parka. So just leave a few, and we generally say don't shred it because that makes the air get in more easily. Those big leaf layers are more helpful than the shreddy bits. And then don't clean it up until it's good and warm, so like May, so they'll have a chance to emerge. And then you can clean it up. Or you can leave it, it could be mulch for your yard too. And then last, we have protection from pesticides where you can. So these are 5 ways that the pollinators or the insects can be affected. So you can directly spray it. So if you're spraying and the sun's up and the bees are on the flowers, you spray the flower. Then you'll probably spray the bee. Or like the leaf cutters collecting something off your rose and it brings that sprayed leaf into its nest. The pesticide could still be active on the flower because they have a period of time until they get broken down by the sun. And then if you are spraying over like a nest site in the ground, or if it's a systemic pesticide, that means the plant has uptaken it in all parts of its body, so seed, leaf, pollen. So we always say you should avoid pesticides, but if something's dying in your yard and you just need it, just make sure you follow the instructions. If it says don't spray during the day, then don't spray during the day. But do know that pesticides are tested only on adult honeybees. And we know in Washington there's 600 species of bees, so it's just a test on one honeybee, one life cycle. It's like, well, we'll try to be cautious and say don't use it because we just don't know what the effect is. And then remember, if you have a really fun and vibrant habitat in your yard, it's not going to just attract pollinators, you're going to attract things that will eat your aphids and eat your whiteflies. And so you're going to set the buffet and all the party guests come, the praying mantises and the fly larvae and the beetles and the spiders. So you may not see an immediate effect, but as that predator population builds up, your plants will stop suffering. And then they'll stay there over the winter and be ready to eat whatever emerges. And then last, if you buy from a nursery, it's helpful to ask the nursery, like, do you spray systemic pesticides like neonicotinoids? And try to get the plants that haven't been sprayed so that you're bringing in a non-toxic food source. And if they do, then that's fine. You can always put a net over the flowers, so while those pesticides wear off, then the bees will be fine, and then you can take the net off. So there's always solutions. Okay, so what you can do in your community. So if you have like farmland that you're trying to do more pollinator stuff with, you can visit the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. They have cost share.
Oh, everyone
Must be alert.
alarming.
Sorry. So it's just emphasizing how great it is.
Seventh floor is 14.
And then, I don't know, have any of you ever talked to your local conservation district? Yeah? Do you know what the conservation district is? Anyone? No? So the conservation district, there's one in every county in Washington and across the United States. They formed during the Dust Bowl to help farmers do more, to help keep their soil down. And they still exist, and they get funding from the state and from grants to do work on land with natural resources. And they have funding, depending on the district, for pollinators or for putting in flowers or what have you. So I say if you have a project that you would like some financial aid with, contact your local conservation district because they can provide cost share up to 70%. So that's like a big chunk of money if you're trying to do something. And they're not well known. So there's two locally that you can go to and talk to. So I used to work at one and I know there's a lot of confusion about them, so I thought I'd mention them. Because it's free money just sitting there. I'm telling you guys. Well, almost free, 30% free. If you have a yard and you want to make a pollinator pledge, we have a fun program called Bring Back the Pollinators, and you get a sign you can put in your yard. So you let everyone know, like, no, this unmowed lawn is habitat, it's not just mess. Or, so you say you're gonna grow 3 seasons of flowers, you're gonna try to use less pesticides, you're gonna provide nesting areas. And then if your neighbors get excited, then when the bees go out to fly and look for food, they're like, oh, I'm gonna go to March's house. March has got some really great bellflowers. And then I'm gonna go fly down the street, and that's where I'm gonna put my nest because Harry and Peter have these great like nesting holes on bare ground. So think about your neighborhood from a bee's perspective. What's within a mile? And yeah, everyone can get involved. Or if you have a school that has a big lawn, maybe you can get them to put in some bushes on the side, or just be an advocate in your community for pollinators. And then if you ever see this symbol on a food that you purchase, that means that they've got a certification that says they're doing more for pollinators and they're following certain rules, and it's third-party verified, so just putting it out there if you've ever seen it. And then last, we have some community science opportunities. So the Bumblebee Atlas, the Firefly Atlas, and the Monarch Mapper. 3 ways if you want to do more monitoring and you're really excited about these creatures. So the Bumblebee Atlas is started June 1st and goes to August, end of August. So you go to this website, they have tutorials on how to do this, there's videos. So you pick a spot on the map, you go out with your equipment, so your net and your cooler, kind of what we did on our nature walk with our tubes. And you net your bumblebees, and then you put them in the cooler and they cool down and they stop moving. You take them out, take their pictures, and then you upload, you release the bumblebees, they warm up again and fly away. And then you submit your data online, and that is helping us figure out where are these bumblebees living, because they haven't been surveyed in like decades. Where are they living? What type of bumblebees are living here? Are they increasing? Are they decreasing? And it's also really fun. So these are some of my bees that are warming up. I took their photos and they're getting their bearings, trying to wake up. And there's also the Firefly Atlas. This can go from March to July. So I don't know if you guys knew, but we have 10 species of firefly in Washington. Most of them fly during the day, so they look like this. And it's just a beetle, right? And it's kind of got like this flattened head area with red. So if you see that, that's a firefly, and you could let them know. Some of them are night flyers. I think only one of them is a flasher. So this, you see this special area on the bottom of the firefly's body. That's where the luminescence comes out, and it will flash. The males and females flash. And they live in your area. You wouldn't know it. They like forest, they like swamps, wetlands. So you guys have a high chance of finding these fireflies. And then some of them are just the female glows and the male finds her on the ground. So those ones will be trickier for you to find. You'll have to go out at night and stare at the ground. But yeah, so, and then so there isn't much known about fireflies in our area. Most of them are studied on the East Coast, as you can imagine, because of the firefly shows at night, but we do have fireflies. Yeah. And then some organizations, if you're really gung-ho about bees and butterflies, there's the Washington Native Bee Society and the Washington Butterfly Association, and they have field trips in the summer and speakers, and you can get your fly catching or your net catching on. And then there's lots of books from Xerces if you want to like pinpoint specific butterflies, you want to grow a specific type of plant, there's a book for that. Or you just want specifically for monarchs or just for bees, and it tells you more about that. And then if you don't, there's also downloads, there's multiple flyers. I haven't even gone through all of it, and I work there. Lots of ways to connect. And then I just wanted to tell you what I do. So this is my normal work environment, is the apple orchard. So I go to an apple farm, and they've got irrigation ponds, and usually there's just weeds growing on it, so we seed it. And then a couple of years later, you have this beautiful wildflower habitat. And then it's usually harboring lots of beneficials, which is what the orchard wants. So this producer it's supposed to say year 4 got cut off. Oh, there it is. So in the spring, there was just swarms of ladybugs coming out of here. And it went to 90 acres and ate all the ladybugs in 90 acres of apple. So that's great, because then they don't have to spray for aphids. So it's very handy, the habitat. So overall, I want you to remember, just create habitat wherever you can. Doesn't matter if it's like a bare spot of ground that's 4 inches by 4 inches, or it's a hedge of blooming roses. That's great, I'll take it. Just make sure you got food, shelter, and if you can, use less pesticides or no pesticides, and I'll be happy. So, if you have any questions, here's my contact information. If you're like, do you think this plant will grow here, or what's this bug question, feel free. I'm in Wenatchee, but I am still local, sort of. I mean, begs to differ. But yeah, so does anyone have questions or concerns? Yes.
Now, this,
Oh, the bee box, yeah.
you leave that outside in the winter? I mean.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's cold up here.
Yeah. So generally, when you put out a bee box, you try to put it maybe under an eave, so it's not getting like pounded by rain or snow. And then, because think about it, the insects are out if they're in the log all winter, and they're under the snow. And then you generally kind of put it where it's southern facing, so that the bees get warmer in the, in the morning. They can warm up more quickly and start flying. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions?
Can we download the presentation?
Oh, if you want,
Yeah,
I can send it to you.
I was gonna ask if you would send me the presentation.
Sure.
We were gonna put the video that Matthew did, on our YouTube link, and if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you don't mind if I share the list of all the resources as well.
No, that's fine.
And I also had a question. You said something about so the pesticides that are actually in the plant,
Mm-hmm.
at what point is that plant safe?
It depends on what it was sprayed with.
Worst case scenario.
2 years.
Okay.
It takes a while.
So what about if that plant goes to seed?
The seed will have it.
The seed will have it.
Because it's systemic
That plant would need to be netted
for a while.
for a really long time. And if you go to somewhere like Home Depot or something and then go, I don't know, like the place I went where I said, where's your phlox? And they said, is that a plant? Probably they don't have a clue, right?
Probably not,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah,
So
it
2 years.
depends.
That's-
It's depending on, well, so for example, when I was growing up, my dad, our oak tree was just an aphid nightmare. Like the honeydew was dripping and it was full of bees and like wasps. And he was like, okay, enough of this. So he got like a root injector, and the tree didn't have anything on it for 10 years.
Wow.
So it depends on, and he told me later that he really regretted doing that because he didn't think it was gonna be that serious. But so anyway, it's the pesticides are, they are created for a specific thing, right? Which is to kill the bugs because you don't want them on there. So just know that they're very good at what they do. But there are, levels, like there's some that are softer and but yeah, just read the label. That's why reading the label is really important, because it'll tell you the period of how long this will take to fade in the sun, or how long it will stay in the plants. Do you have any other things to add? 'Cause you're the weed lady, right?
You said it all, read the label.
It's very important to read the label. And sometimes it's confusing, so if you're like, I don't know what this means, feel free to reach out. You can reach out to me, you can find your local weed board, reach out to them, and it's always better to ask questions. Yeah.
So we have a lot of gardeners around here, and I'm not sure we have enough squash bees or
Oh, are the squashes not being productive?
it depends, but how do we promote or
More
attract
squash?
them or
Yeah.
import them or?
Yeah, well, I'd say if you are growing squash and it's been a year and you haven't had a lot of luck, it might take a while for the bees to discover that you have squash. And then they'll move in and they'll start, making their homes next to your squash. So when you plant squash the next year, they're like right out and pollinating. So it's tricky. You can try and sometimes they sleep in the flowers overnight. If you had a friend who had squash that was getting really pollinated, you could just take some flowers from their yard and put them in your yard. Be like, come on bees, look at that, I got squash. Or while they're flying, you could get a butterfly net and net them and try to bring them to your yard, but they might just go back to their hole. But just remember they're animals, and they do take some time to discover. So like, even if you set out like one of these, you may not get a whole lot the first year because they don't know it's there yet. But then one of them will find it, and then the other ones will start finding it, and then you'll have all the tubes full before you know it.
So, I have some radishes that are going to seed, so
Mhm.
I'm just gonna leave them.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
you
that's
don't like
good.
that? I'll take it.
Oh yeah.
Today was time for that. This, me,
Yeah.
needs to look like that.
Yes.
I'm not a lousy gardener.
Yeah.
That's what I need.
That's right. No, I mean honestly, like neglect is bees love good neglect. Like mustards, if carrots go to seed, those syrphid flies love carrots. Like the blooming carrot. In fact, some carrot farmers to make carrot seed rely on flies because flies and carrots are like close. Or fly, yeah. So yeah, anything that makes a flower, like dill, radish and beets.
So Pam, maybe that's a project we should do, is make signs that go in the garden that say, I'm not a bad gardener, I'm intentionally letting it all go to seed for the pollinators.
Yeah, and if you don't want the seeds in your yard, you just wait till they stop blooming and chop the top then. But oh yeah, all those garden plants that normally are like spinach or
Yeah, that's the next one.
mustard greens. Oh yeah, those are, they love those. So don't fret if that happens, if they bolt. That's good. Any other questions?
I really like leaf cutter bees. And so what's the best plant to attract the leaf cutters?
Those Clarkia. They like roses. There's a list.
Okay, I'll look it up.
But also, if you go around and you see leaves with holes, just plant more of those. Generally, the Clarkia, they cut the petals on the flowers, so the tube is multicolored when you see it. It's really cool.